Hey guys, it's Editing Giles here. Recently, I wrote a review for Premier Christianity on the latest Superman film, and they invited me to go on Premier Christian Radio to talk about it. So I wanted to share my conversation with Esther Higham on Inspirational Breakfast last Wednesday. I hope you enjoy this little bonus episode, and I hope you go and see Superman and let me know what you thought of it.
Premier Christian Radio, your voice of hope.
Now, it is one of the most iconic superhero lines in the world.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman. Yes, it's Superman.
That was a Superman from the 1951 series, but it was created in 1938 and has been a fixture on our screens since 1951. But the latest film in the franchise, if you like, released on Friday, has already earned over $95 million at the box office and is predicted to be the biggest film of the year. But controversy was sparked earlier when director James Gunn described the movie as the story of America and Superman as an immigrant who came from other places. This seems to come amid a bit of a growing trend where filmmakers and major studios are using cinema as a platform for political and cultural commentary. Is this trend gaining momentum, and is it reshaping the way we watch films? Well, here to help us unpack this, as well as to explore the messianic themes in one of the most hotly anticipated films of the summer, is Giles Gough, host of the God in Film podcast. That felt like quite a big build-up. I felt like I needed a kind of epic movie soundtrack to welcome you in, but I'm sorry I haven't got one to hand. Good morning, Giles.
Hi Esther, thanks for having me.
So you've been to see it with your wife, who's a Superman superfan. So, was it worth the bag of popcorn?
Absolutely, 100%. It's been a long time coming, but it was worth every second of it.
So tell us first of all about the experience of the movie. We'll dig into the themes in a minute, but what's good about it? What took you on that journey?
So, crucially, one of the things to note about this film is it's directed by James Gunn. He's the new head of DC Studios. They've had a few sort of false starts and missteps in terms of how to get their cinematic universe onto the big screen. And he's come to kind of guide it into a more Marvel-friendly kind of world, essentially. So he's obviously the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, which already gives you an idea of the quality and the level of fun that you're going to get in his kind of films. And it starts, one of the things that's so enjoyable about it is it's not an origin story. We already know how Clark Kent came to Earth, and if you didn't, my goodness, where have you been paying attention to pop culture for the last 80 years? It gives you a lot of exposition. It tells you he's been on the planet for 30 years. He's just gone into a fight. He's just lost his first fight, and the shot in the trailer of him landing all bruised and broken in the Arctic. That's actually the first shot of the film. One thing that's really enjoyable is the trailer doesn't really give anything away, which is fantastic. And I think crucially, the big difference between this version and the Henry Cavill version, the Zack Snyder version, is it feels a lot lighter. It leans into the silliness. I think one of the key aspects is the fact that Superman wears his trunks on the outside of his outfit again. And that was, apparently they were talking about that. They were trying to work out a way to make it not look ridiculous, not make it look silly. And Zack Snyder was saying, look, there's no way, I had to get rid of it. It just didn't work. And then David Corenswet, the latest actor to play Superman, said, well, maybe they're supposed to look a little silly. Maybe the reason he wears them is to look a little silly, to undermine how powerful he is. And I think that this film kind of does that really well. It doesn't shrink back on how powerful Superman is. He does lose a few fights here and there. He does get smacked around quite a bit, so he doesn't have that kind of Hercules problem of being unbeatable. But a lot of the film is just quite light and quite fun, and it's such a joy to have that back in Superman again.
Yeah, but with that lightness, again, it's caused a bit of controversy around this idea that Superman is an immigrant, and there's also quite a comment on the military as well. Tell me about those more serious themes.
So it's an interesting this one because it's one of those areas where Superman hasn't changed at all, but the cultural conversation seems to have lurched so dramatically to the right because Superman's an immigrant, and he has been since 1938, and there's been no version whatsoever of him that has shied away from that. Different iterations have had him sort of working more closely with the military, and this version has him sort of working quite separately from them. And it's one of those, it's so strange because you have a billionaire on screen who the government subcontracts some of its defense out to. This billionaire, Lex Luthor, played wonderfully by Nicholas Hoult, has his own private prisons in a pocket dimension where he puts people who are criminals or people who've just said nasty things about him, and he sticks them there. So, and also crucially, there's a conflict going on in a sort of unnamed, in a fictional country where it is an incredibly well-armed military going up against an unarmed civilian population. Now, crucially, this script was written back in 2021. They started production in 2022. So none of these things are a commentary on the current American government or the conflict going on in the Middle East. Literally, the world has just gotten a bit more evil, and people are having problems with the fact that Superman still fights evil, it seems.
That's really interesting. So maybe there's something prophetic about it as well. We know that cinema is struggling. It's having to depend on big blockbuster franchises and remakes. Do you think there is a bit of a trend of directors, even of these kind of movies, trying to bring some kind of message in as well as all the Hollywood fun games and fireworks?
Do you know what? That's a fascinating question. I feel like films have always been political. Even when they're not, people will still find a political message or allegory in it. And I think it's not until like the 60s that these things are allowed to be sort of critical of the government. I think there's also an industry of criticism that comes around films, and obviously, how can I put this? Blockbusters are like the last bit of monoculture we have left. It's the thing where we can all go and see this one big film and we can all have a commentary about it. And one of the things you get, obviously, is still, you get rage baiting, you get that kind of cottage industry of outrage. In fact, the film makes a joke about it. In the film, there's one point where Lex Luthor points to these rows of like rage monkeys, literally all just typing how much they hate Superman onto the thing and putting it out into the world. So I think politics is always going to be there in some way, shape or form. And I think sometimes people accentuate that just in order to have something to say and to sort of drive their own engagement.
Yeah, but as Christians, we like to try and find also the spiritual themes. And of course, you know, there's an obvious comparison to make, isn't there, of someone coming from an outer world to save humankind. How does that stack up in this particular superhero movie? Is Superman a bit like Jesus?
Well, in my God in Film podcast, my whole thing is about finding faith parallels in stuff. So this is my golf, essentially. So here's two interesting things. Yes, Superman's like Jesus. We will get to that. But he's also a bit like an Old Testament prophet, a little fellow called Moses. I don't know if you've heard of him. So Moses, obviously, he's born into one family. It's unsafe. He's sort of put into the basket in the reeds and watched over until the Pharaoh's daughter comes in and picks him up and then adopts him in that fashion. So what we have essentially is a baby being sent away by their parents from what would certainly be total destruction and death, and the baby's found by a prospective parent and raised as their own, which sounds incredibly similar to the last son of Krypton being sent from Krypton to Earth to be raised by the Kents, you know? So there's always, as well as the Jesus parallels, there's a lot of sort of Jewish parallels going on there. He's obviously created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who are both European Jewish immigrants. So they could really relate to the idea of looking the same but being different in some way, shape or form. In terms of the Jesus stuff, there's so much that we could talk about there. It's the interesting thing is how Superman is more the kind of Messiah the Jewish people were expecting, and Jesus is the Messiah that they got. You know, they wanted somebody who would be all powerful, who would throw off the Roman Empire, and then you get an itinerant former carpenter coming and telling us how the meek will inherit the earth. I imagine they might feel a little bit shortchanged on that fact, you know? But what's interesting and what's fascinating about Superman is he always makes the right choice. We have had no shortage of anti-heroes, morally compromised, way, shape, or form. But I say the interesting thing about Superman isn't the power. We've seen like so many different godlike characters. It's the fact that he has a strict no-kill rule, and he's doing his best to sort of look after people even when they don't deserve it. And I think the Jesus parallels there speak for themselves.
So if we go and see the movie with friends or family members who aren't Christians, or we're chatting about it with friends or colleagues, what's the take-home question or thought that we could bring that might help them consider those spiritual themes?
That is a really good question. I think the thing I would think about is there's this lovely little scene right early on where Lois Lane gets to interview Clark as Superman. And it's in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. She says to him, you entered a country illegally. You intervened in a military conflict. Did you consult with the president? Did you consult with the Secretary of Defense? And Superman just kind of looks at her bizarre with a befuddled look and just says, well, people were going to die. It was the right thing to do. And I think, in essence, that's what we've just got to ask ourselves. Like, how can I put this? What would Superman do and what would Jesus do are so often the same answer in a lot of situations. There might just be, actually, I don't know if there might be exactly the same amount of flying for all I know, but just less tights involved.
Excellent stuff. Thank you for watching it for us, Giles. Sounds like one to watch over the summer. This latest Superman film is out now, and you can hear more from Giles Gough on his God in Film podcast. And you can read his review in detail at Premier Christianity magazine. Just go to premierchristianity.com.